Okay, as already written here in the chat, it was a far walk from the main session here to our breakout session. We are very glad that you arrived. We want to start the session now, the session on the agricultural data space. I want to welcome you to this session. My name is Jörg Dörr. I am part of the Extended Institute Management of the Fraunhofer IDSA in Kaiserslautern, and I'm heading there the program Smart Farming. And I want to give you some organizational information about this breakout session. So this session is planned for 30 to 40 minutes. So we will have some more time than the first breakout sessions. And Ralf and we would like to have this an interactive session. So please, at any point in time, post your questions or comments in the chat. Whenever one of us is talking, the other one will have an open eye on the chat. And when it's appropriate, we will just address your questions and read your comments. And we're looking forward to the exchange with you. And in addition, at the end, after the short talks that we give, we will also have a discussion slot where we can have a more deep dive in the topics that are of interest for you. And with that, I want to hand over to my colleague Ralf Kalmar to introduce himself and also what we planned for this breakout session.
Yeah, thank you, Jörg. My name is Ralf Kalmar. I'm working in business development here at Fraunhofer IDSA in Kaiserslautern, but I'm also heading one of the Fraunhofer Lighthouse projects in the area of agriculture. It's named Cognitive Agriculture, and this is also a project where we closely work on and build up this agricultural data space, which we will talk this afternoon. And so my first task would be to show you regarding the agricultural data space, why do we need an additional data space for agriculture? What's so special about this domain? And so maybe before we look and deeper dive into two specific topics, namely the digital twin and the topic of data usage control, I will give you a just brief introduction of what this agricultural data space and its goals are about. So if you look at agriculture, this is a very technology-affine domain, and agriculture is quite advanced regarding technology. And so there already exist a number of data platforms in agriculture for many years. And here just also added some of the more prominent names to that. So some of these platforms, they origin from manufacturers, but also service providers set up digital platforms so that at the time now, we have more or less islands of digital platforms and islands of data spaces with also proprietary formats. There have been a few initiatives now started. So I put this dotted line Data Connect here to show that some platforms and organizations start to collaborate, but we are far away from the interoperability that we would need for digital transformation in agriculture. So one of the biggest challenges then is also the lack of interoperability in this domain. This means, for example, also from the viewpoint of a farmer, that data is inaccessible, that things that should work together do not work. And of course, also this hinders automation of processes, both on the business process side, but also on the machine side. We also then get into the problems of data inconsistency and incompatibility of services and data. And last but not least, there are also different standards how to handle data privacy, security, or data sovereignty. And with this lack of interoperability, we get lack of flexibility and, of course, additional costs and effort, which means in the easiest way to the need to enter data multiple times in different systems by hand, from a service provider's view to support different data formats or to be present in different marketplaces on different platforms. And on top of that, it is hard to understand how the different platforms and providers do handle their data, how they give you data sovereignty, and how privacy and all these things are managed. Since some of those platforms have their origin also in different countries with different legislation and laws for data usage. So our vision of the agricultural data space has very much in common, of course, with the overall mission of the international data spaces, which means that we would like to interconnect the different stakeholders of such an ecosystem by the means of standardized interfaces. So like this IDS connector, which would be sitting at the edge of all the different platforms maybe, and enable the exchange of data. So I put here one example of an existing agricultural data platform, and of course one goal would be to extend the outreach of such data platforms towards the value chain, also in food processing and sales. On the other hand, of course, also the interaction and inter-exchange between platforms within the agricultural domain could be or should be eased with such concepts. So therefore, the agricultural data space is a domain-specific solution, which should also take into account the specific needs of the ag domain and the prerequisites that we already have there, given the existing standards and existing platforms. So what we do in the internal Fraunhofer Lighthouse project, Cognitive Agriculture, is by other topics also look into what are the specific needs of the ag domain regarding such platforms, and what would be concepts that should be developed or could be handled also in addition and on top of the generic IDS concepts for that specific domain. And two of these aspects we would like to look deeper into in this afternoon. And one would be, for example, using the concept of digital twins for improving and enhancing interoperability, because there are already hundreds of data standards. The 101st standard will not be the solution. We need a new concept on a different level of abstraction. But before going into a more deep dive into that, we would also like to know a bit more from you, and maybe start a quick poll with a series of some questions. What is your specific background regarding the agricultural domain, and where do you come from? And so the first question would be, are you from the ag domain, or are you from a different domain? And please, you should see now the survey. Please click where you're from and what your background is. So half of the people have given their votes so far. And maybe just wait a few more seconds so that we can reach the 20 maybe. But I think it will not change much regarding the overall trend. So most are not from the ag domain. Only about 12% stated that they are in the ag domain. So I think regarding the second question, we will have a definite answer also regarding your role. So here we seem to be very research focused.
Ralph, I think you're muted for some reason. So I cannot hear Ralph. I don't know how about the others. Can you hear the others?
Can you hear me now?
Ah, yeah, now we can hear.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what happened, but if you can hear me again.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have 10 votes so far. And this seems to be half and half divided between people who already know the international data spaces and their concepts, and half of them don't know them. And maybe just one final question. Regarding how far away do you see the realization of a data space? Could be IDS, could be a GAIA-X, anything else. What do you think? So very close would be probably next year. Approaching is then within the next 3 years, and far, far away is anything beyond that. Yes, and so I think here about 3/4 of the audience are quite promising that within the next few years we will have this, and 1/5 already stated that this would be very close, but nobody really sees it already established. Yeah, thank you for that. Regarding digital twins, or maybe Jörg, do we have questions already now from the audience, from the chat?
Yes, there is one question just popping up. How does IDS support a data space when the standard only provides for bilateral data exchange? Boris Otto has talked about the need for data aggregators, but this is not defined today, although potentially valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The point is that the different stakeholders participating in such an ecosystem can offer different services. So you could also have a storage service that would then have the role also for hosting a marketplace, for example, for a set of service providers. So it could be that an IT service provider would provide such an infrastructure that would enable, for example, also SMEs or startups to get an environment to provide their services and get this connection to this data space as a service. So it does not mean that each organization has to implement these things on his or her own. And especially, I think, in farming, where you have many small and medium-sized enterprises, this will be the standard case. So a farmer will not have an IDS connector. The farmer will have a service provider that might host the data and also give the data services to him or her.
I think also with what you will talk about with the digital twin, this becomes maybe also a bit more clear how this kind of aggregated point of view will pop up. So far, we have no further questions.
Yeah, so then let's give a more deep dive in some new things. So the digital twin concept, you might have already heard in the context of Industry 4.0. And simply speaking, the concept of a digital twin is having a digital representation of a physical asset. And this can be a machine like a tractor, this can be a field, this could also be an animal like a cow. So it's just a concept to encapsulate this physical asset to provide an easier way for digital systems, for services to access its services and its data. So this digital twin provides this access and also would host this data. A digital twin could also be composed or contain other digital twins, like the digital twin of a field could contain sensors for humidity, or a tractor, of course, can have many digital twins of components within it. The interesting thing about this digital twin concept is that it would be an abstraction layer above all the given standards, and it will also make quite a few things easier. Of course, it would be an investment to create such an abstraction layer, but one interesting thing is that this would be the single source of truth, for example, because the digital representation is really tied one-to-one to a physical asset, and there might be proxies or maybe shadow copies, but there is only one digital twin. And this digital twin could also be traded like the physical assets. So if you have the cow and all the data about that cow regarding its birth, its properties, if the cow is sold, also the digital twin would travel to the new owner. So for that reason, what you will see later, also the aspect of data sovereignty, we see very much tied to such a digital twin, and this would be also a difference a bit to the existing IDS concept, where you only have data sovereignty management at the moment in the connector. We would also add this directly to the twin, or where the policies to that would be resided. And this is just a few examples showing you how would such an interaction with a twin look like. So if we had a field's digital twin, this could provide services for information of that twin, like giving field boundaries to another machine, or providing a service if the field is ready to drive on it, or if it's too muddy or too wet, so that you should not drive on it with heavy machinery. You could also ask for temperature, or even have twins of plants reside in that could be accessed again from a machine or from another service. So of course, this already looks again very complex. But if you look at the concepts of service directories that are also used in Industry 4.0, a digital twin would provide a directory, a listing of what data and services it shall provide. which also gives the ability to flexibly extend the services and data. So this means we move all this data management to one area higher up in abstraction. However, we can also make things more comfortable by providing services. So the services, of course, data retrieval, or maybe even initiating a data collection could be one side. But you would find all typical data of geographic data, soil data, everything you might think of that is contained, for example, in a digital field twin. If we look a bit deeper into the digital twin, you might have heard about data usage control already. And since this twin is deeply tied to an asset, we think that it's a natural way of tying data usage control to that twin. So every single data access request would first be going through this data usage control layer. But another interesting thing about services is that by using vocabulary and ontology services, and you might recognize that there is already the concept of vocabulary in the IDS, but it has not been instantiated so far in many domains, then this would be a very nice service for automated conversion between different data stored. So if we have a generic service that would use this vocabulary to give back semantics of that data in standardized ways, then this would be a very nice added benefit to such a digital twin. And in agriculture, we already have vocabularies like the AgroVoc, for example, which is an internationally maintained vocabulary with 30+ languages and hundreds of different names in it, specific to the agricultural domain, would also enable internationalization and easier comparison of data types and data kinds in that specific domain. So from that aspect, I would like to close this brief introduction of the digital twin and would be curious if you have questions regarding that concept, knowing that we do not have very much time to introduce this concept in detail here until now.
So thanks, Ralf, for the talk. There was already a comment by Mr. Forstmann that says, the notion of the digital twin leads to a large weighing if one associates it with a digital bratwurst. That's of course a little bit funny, but I think what you want to point at is the whole point of that. Of course, we don't stop with the farming. It all goes to the food processing areas, and we create these kind of things that we eat and we like to eat, and the food traceability issues come with it. And this is a strength if we can extend this kind of scope and not only look at it from a silo perspective, but what the IDS also encourages to break up the silos and take a broader perspective. And I know that you're very active here with this one. Okay, another comment, we should be very, very careful with such communication with the producer side of living organisms to be taken as still down to earth. Yeah, I agree. Okay, other comments, questions? We have a few more minutes to talk about this digital twin. Any other comments by the others or questions from you?
Yeah, so maybe just one final comment why I picked the digital field twin here. So we already have digital twins for machines, more or less established in one way to another, and also for animals, it's yeah, quite easy to understand. For the field where we have a very large variety. Nobody has really defined this what we call Ackerschlag-Kartei also in German, but we want to be more than such an Ackerschlag-Kartei. We want to have services in that and want to give more flexibility into that concept, also to speed up innovation in that domain, because at the moment this interoperability issue hinders us in introducing new technology and also new business models, services into that domain. And an open, flexible standard such as these digital twins would encourage also innovation and speed up the digital transformation in that area.
Okay, no more further questions arrived, Ralf? There is one. Which such tight margins will this open opportunities to the sector? With such tight margins, will this open opportunities to the sector? Now I understand, yeah.
Yes, as all investments, even in IT, these are expensive investments, true. But on the other hand, the technology of digital platforms has great ways of scaling up. So we need the one big investor who would invest in this technology. But if we see how much feedback on and how well perceived also this GAIA-X infrastructure is, then I think that we are at a point where this can really come true within the next years, and that it will not be at the cost of the farmer, because these investments will be shouldered by larger other organizations, and in the end it should give benefits to the farmer, since he or she will get additional services, has to be less concerned and put less work in moving data around from one point to the other or typing in data. So of course all this should be done in order to make things easier and not to put too much the cost pressure on the farmer.
Okay, with our tight time budget, I think we should move on a little bit, but we will spare the other questions for the discussion round at the end.
Yeah, I think we will have in the end maybe a few more minutes to look through that thing. I see one last question here. I just want to comment on open source. So in the Industry 4.0 domain, there are already open source projects. One is called BASYX, BASYX. And for the digital twin in agriculture, we are also looking into using parts of that open source implementation and maybe branch off something, because this generic concept which has been developed there should also be applicable to a large extent. But of course, there need to be domain-specific extensions. But currently, there's a lot going on in the domain, and also on the European scale, there are many interesting voices regarding the digital twin.
Yes, and that will be very interesting for us to see how the open source community from the IDS and the open source community from the Industry 4.0 can grow together. I think that was also highlighted. I think it was in the IDS and practice talks when it came to the Industry 4.0. And that's, of course, we watch carefully also for the agricultural domain. Okay, so then I would say we can continue with another aspect. The data sovereignty was emphasized today in the talk, in the plenary, in the stream. But when we have insights in many domains in our institute, but I have to say, when we look at the agricultural data space, then this topic of keeping control over your data and being sovereign of your data, that has a very specific role, especially for the farmers there. And that has to do with several aspects, and I want to talk with you about some of them that we observe. So you all know that the agricultural data space for the digitalization needs a lot of concepts, and a lot of those were already explained today. We need the vocabularies, we need the connectors, and one technique that I want to highlight here in the middle is the bold one, is the data usage control. That's just one further component that helps to control this kind of flow of data. And this is very of specific importance if an agricultural data space spans the clouds and connects the different cloud solutions, like my colleague stated in the introductory talk. So if we see here that the data is coming from different robots, from the farmers' farm management systems, satellite data, but also data from public authorities, the people want to keep control. And it's not only a matter of companies keeping control over the data like we heard this morning, but it's really the farmers that want to keep control over this data. What we did a survey in our Lighthouse project, COGNAC. It's not representative, it's non-representative, it's only 50 participants, but we wanted to have a focus on the data sovereignty because we learned from other studies, like for example in Bavaria from the LFL, there was a study that the majority of the farmers really take care about the data sovereignty. And also as part of the feasibility study of the German Ministry for Agriculture, we learned also that the data sovereignty is a big part, and we wanted to understand it much better. And you see it's a good distribution of different roles that participated in there, and we wanted to see what effect would it have if the data sovereignty would be comprehensively realized. So if it would really be there in an agricultural data space. And you see, it's not a concept where all people agree that you want to have it. 23% felt that this could even be counterproductive and would complicate the work and the handling of data if there is such an instrument, like you can control where the data is flowing and how the data is used. So we have to be very careful if we introduce such concepts that it will not make our work more complex, that it is a usable, easy to use mechanism providing benefit and not hindering you with your work. 65%, and that's the good news, agreed that this would enable more flexible usage, multiple usage of data. So we will get more data into the data space that can be used. And 60% explicitly said it will increase their willingness to share and provide data. And that is something that we hear very often. If there is no mechanism for data sovereignty, I will hide the data as a company, as a farmer, maybe as a company, a service company inside an agricultural ecosystem. So that is very important that this data sovereignty is treated well in an agricultural data space. The interesting thing that we also have more deep dive, and I put the link to the study. Unfortunately, it's only available in German language. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that. We also asked for several very specific things, and one specific thing was, how do you interpret the term data sovereignty? What does data sovereignty mean for you? And we asked them, and you see, it is really a broad spectrum of answers that was stated there. The first one, I have no opinion about that, was almost not at all clicked there, but it's reaching from data usage by third parties only with a consent. I think that is what we heard in the morning. Via it's a kind of having the feeling of an ownership of data, up to things like that you can delete the data, and we had nice examples there. So the question is how we can deal with this kind of situations, and for which data, because data is often treated as, it's all data, but in the agricultural domain, we have very different types of data. And of course, there is the question what we mean if we now talk with data sovereignty. So here, this slide should give you an idea about that. So the data sovereignty is the ability to make self-determined decisions about the use of data collected within one's own business context, to understand the implications of the decision, so there is also a transparency issue on it, and to be able to change these decisions at any time. And that, of course, is applicable for some data, but not for all data. And we just had it from a farmer's perspective. We put it here that there's a whole spectrum of different types of data, from things that probably are very open, which could also are fine to have it with the EU Open Data Directive. A lot of governmental data is supposed to be openly available also in a digital shape. We will see more on that in the next years, I guess. And this spectrum continues up to really business critical decisions like sales revenues or efficiency of mechanisms, and personal issues where you really treat personal data, where the GDPR really takes effect. So we should not say all the data is the same and we handle it the same. There's an increasing need for protection on the different levels. And just to see that a little bit, what we can do with the data sovereignty, I think in this morning, if you were in the session where the usage control, even with the My Data Control technologies was presented, you got a feeling with the PSD2, this finance example, what you could do and how flexible today's technology is. And we're talking here about technology that is available in the market, that's licensed by companies. It's not something that is in a prototype state, where you say, I can limit the data use according to the context where I am. Here in the picture on the right side, I put that Joe can share data with Jane if her vehicle is located within the boundaries of a field. So if you have a contractor arriving at your field, then the data is accessible. Otherwise, it's not shared by the IDS connector. Or you have time-based or quantity-based restrictions, or you filter information out, or you do anonymization on the fly, where you really anonymize the data when you put it into the, when you want to use it for certain kind of purposes. All that is currently possible. But we have a big problem with that one. And that is what we try to depict here. On the left side, we have the people, right? The people that have some kind of demands that they would like to specify. We call that the policies. And the data sovereignty demands of the farmers and the other stakeholders, they are diverse and they are really different. And you don't want them to have a technical system that treats it. So you want to have a very simple interface where they can, in natural language or just by selecting things, state their policies, what should happen. And what happens here is that in the end, on the very right side, it has to be translated to be enforced by the complete ecosystem and the data space. And that is something, this translation between the human person and the technical enforced policies, that is not easy. It's possible, but a good question, and we know that what's really not easy is that the different people specifying these demands have different capabilities, and with these different capabilities, they need different kind of interfaces to specify their policies. So it's a different story to have it from a person from a company or for a farmer to do that. And that will still, in the agricultural domain, keep us busy to have good interfaces for the farmers that are well accepted. If you want to learn more about this concept, we published that on a white paper. I think that's available in English and in German. It's the ADS white paper, and we just put here a link for that one. And I'm happy now to see questions arrived. Ralph, which questions and comments arrived here in the chat?
Yeah, so there was one question from Mr. Vossmann regarding that we need to succeed to transform the understanding of such concepts to the farmers. So we need to communicate the benefits of such advanced data sovereignty concepts to the farmers. And when following the talks, for example, this morning in the Bitkom Digital Farming Congress, you could also see that, of course, many platform providers, they claim that, of course, the farmer has control on how the data is being used, but just in this one single platform. And some functionality like withdrawal of data usage rights or multiple data usage rights, or what was also discussed is getting money for providing data for certain purposes. All these types of new business models and the flexibility of to act with the data in a sovereign way, this is not connected with these concepts, but it's claimed under the label of data sovereignty, and of course therefore we need to make this clear what benefits these IDS concepts will have to the farmer, but also to the ecosystem.
So if I can add to that, this kind of making clear what we mean with the technical term, that's really a big facet. In another project, what we did to make clear for the farmers, and we did that with the farmers, what the data sovereignty means is we just built the interfaces. We built mock-ups, how this looks like, and show it in a tangible way and ask them, is that what you want? And there came very different feedback on that one, right? So just talking about the technical terms will not help here. It's really making the interfaces very specific, not general purpose, but really stating here, if you assume that you have this kind of interface, do you want to use that in order to control your data, or is that much too complicated or too sophisticated? Do we have other questions toward this topic of data sovereignty or comments, or shall we open up to the general discussion? Wait a few seconds if more questions to this topic pop up. Okay, if no questions pop up here in the chat, I want to reuse one question that already popped up in the chat, and that's perfect for the overall general discussion that we had here. There was a question, what do we think we should do to convince more agricultural, I think it was phrased, activists of the IDS? So what do we need to do in order to promote the IDS in the community? That was a question that was proposed here, and that's something that I think is really good opener to talk with all of you, so you can also share your opinion on that one. So let us know what you think what one should do, and then we will also give you our statements, what we think about here. There's already a comment on that one. Practical examples are indeed the best proof. Yeah, that would be completely in line with my view. We have to have very concrete use cases, what we can do with the IDS. Very concrete examples, as tangible as possible here. Be able to show the value, and I agree to the practical examples and the proof. And that is something I think where the IDS already always looked for it. How can you show the value? And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the GAIA-X activities that are, it was explained before that the technical concepts of IDS are to a large extent also in GAIA-X. In the GAIA-X, there is this use case initiative going on, and they collect use cases for a lot of domains and also for the agricultural domain. So at the moment, there are so-called GAIA-X agricultural use cases collected, and they have exactly this kind of idea to make it very tangible on the one side what we can do because we have the technical features, and on the other side be very explicit about the value that they have for the different stakeholders. So that is an activity. If you're not used to it, but you are interested in it, you can send me an email. I can keep you up to date with that one, because I'm also moderating one of the groups for the companies, what value they could get from that one for the BLE and BMEL in Germany. But this is, I think, a good approach to say really what are the practical examples and what value would you get if you have this at hand.
Maybe let me add a thought on that. So we, of course, were also looking in what would be the use cases which would benefit most from data sovereignty. And one area we came across is certification in the ag domain. So certification for the farmer, which requires a lot of data, which is very effort intensive in collecting that data, and which could provide valuable insights for many processes if you could manage the access to that data in a good and meaningful way. So I would be interested to hear your opinions on that. What would you think would be a good use case? And on the other hand, maybe what do you think about certification, which is an international topic also, and how it could be improved by such a platform solution and the means of data sovereignty with it? And so we also enlarged the chat here. You should have the line at the bottom of your screen and can type in your comments and questions here. Yeah, so one comment that this should also be supported by legislative means, and also maybe on the other hand, to automatically interpret laws by means of the respective rules for data sovereignty, the policies that they are derived from laws directly.
So if you have others' opinions, you can post it. But even if you have other questions or things that you would like to discuss in the last couple of minutes, we exceed already a little bit our time frame, right? So, but if you have some other topics that you would like to be addressed here or have questions, feel free to now use that time to post it here, because I think we have to close somewhere in about 3 to 4 minutes.
Yes, and even after this session, of course, feel free to contact Jörg or me. You should find our contact data in the agenda, or of course, you will also find ourselves on the internet or on LinkedIn. So just drop us a note, call us. We'd be happy to discuss your topic and follow up on it.
So there did no further questions arrive. No further questions arrived in the chat, I think. So if you're all satisfied, have no further questions and no topics to talk about, then I think we thank you very much for participating here in the breakout session and staying a bit longer with us. We hope you had a very great day for the this kind of whole day, from the morning sessions and also the breakout sessions. And we would be very happy to stay in touch with you. So take care and hope to see you again in the next events. Goodbye.
Bye.